name is Jamie Fly. I'm the Executive Director of the Foreign Policy Initiative. So today we're very honored to have Governor Tim Pawlenty with us. I'm going to turn it over to Bill Kristol, one of FBI's founding board members, to introduce the governor and then moderate a conversation with him. Bill?
Thanks, Jamie, and thank you all for coming and making your way through the rain and the security nightmare and other and knowing the trouble goes out. It's good to have you here. It's great to have, I want to thank Tim Pawlenty for taking the time to do this. He's awfully busy, obviously, as a top, maybe the top Romney surrogate and spokesman. He needs no introduction, two-term governor of Minnesota, very fine record there. We met when he was governor and talked about domestic policy, but I think Tim and I went on a trip to a security conference in Munich together while you were still governor, 08, 09, with Senator McCain, Senator Lieberman. And I remember at the time going back and telling people in the office that you think the governor's awfully busy, and especially in a state like Minnesota, where it's not a piece of cake to get your legislative agenda through and deal with the legislature and all that. And you were someone who really was interested in and knowledgeable about foreign policy. Maybe I was late in realizing this, but it's certainly become very, very evident over the last 4 years, too, especially the last couple of years when you were out of office and you spent so much time focusing on national security at a time when, honestly, the immediate political payoff perhaps would have been not quite spend so much time traveling abroad and meeting world leaders, and you really, I think, it's a model of public spiritedness that you spend so much time doing this, and now you're spending an hour with us here is just a further moment of public spiritedness, and so thank you for doing that, and I just thought we'd have a conversation and spend some time on with questions. What do you expect Governor Romney to say about national security tomorrow night? What won't he say, but because of constraints of time, but that he believes? I mean, honestly, what's 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes? What's the sort of core message that you think the Romney Ryan ticket needs to tell the American citizens, the American public about national security?
Well, I'll answer that directly, but let me add my voice of thanks for you being here. The logistics of getting here are not easy, given the security perimeters and procedures, and so we appreciate you making the effort to be here and be part of this discussion. I also want to thank FBI for the important and needed work that they do and the voice that they are with respect to national security and foreign policy issues. This is a terrific organization. Some of you, maybe all of you, enjoyed their overnight brief. It is a terrific read every morning. It gives you, of course, a very quick spin through the preceding events in national security and world affairs in the preceding 24 hours. And I really applaud and am grateful for FBI's work and voice in this discussion. And it's personified by people like Bill Kristol. Bill, of course, is a leader in FBI and a lot of other things, but his thoughtfulness and seriousness and the understanding that he brings to it in terms of complexity and strength is really wonderful. And I want to thank you, Bill, for your voice as well. With respect to Governor Romney and the campaign that is in front of us between now and in November, there's been some voices in the media. It's kind of interesting, I would say, on the center-left end of the continuum, who kind of said, with respect to foreign policy, there's essentially no difference between President Obama and Governor Romney. And I think that's a strategic or tactical effort on their part to say, let's not highlight some of the differences, because in my view, they're not favorable to the president. And I won't go through the full list, Bill, but I think as an overarching statement, you have a president who, in more than one instance, has taken a step or 2 or 3 back from the role of global leader as the indispensable nation, leader of the indispensable nation. And I think you see in Governor Romney a willingness to be more assertive and leading not from behind but in front. Let me give you a few examples of that. President Obama, of course, has, with great fanfare, entered into a reset with Russia, restarting the relationships with Russia. That has had a lot of complexity around it for understandable reason, but it started out with a thirst by the president to negotiate an arms reduction treaty that Governor Romney has significant concerns with, particularly as it relates to the Russians' interpretation and impression that it may limit the United States' ability going forward for the most robust missile defense systems or additional missile defense systems. The president not only has embraced that treaty and cites it as one of his landmark accomplishments, but he's now signaled, both on mic and off mic, that he intends to take that even further, the parameters of which and contours of which remain to be seen. Governor Romney has said he would review that treaty. And in particular, as it relates to missile defense systems, he would have done it and would do it differently going forward. As you know, one of the decisions in this regard after President Bush asked two of our best friends in the world, namely the Czech Republic and Poland, to stick their necks out, both militarily and politically, to host missile defense and radar installations in the Czech Republic and Poland. President Obama came into office and withdrew that decision. Now, there's great merit, I think, to President Bush's initiative in that regard and to have gone forward with that. But even setting aside the technical aspects of that decision, once you have two of your great allies and friends extend their neck that far out because the United States asked them to, and in the case of the former Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, arguably lost his job over this decision to help the United States. You have Lech Walesa, after the fact, quoted, I believe, in the New York Times, saying, in the wake of the decision to pull the rug out from the Czech Republic and Poland, you had Lech Walesa say, you can, quote, no longer trust the United States of America, close quote. These are sights and sounds, not of a world leader of the indispensable nation leading from the front, but these are sights and sounds of a leader who has a different approach at tempo. So, and I can go on. Look, for example, with respect to the relationship with Israel. Clearly within Israel, both in terms of the populace as well as the leadership, there is an apprehension, an uncertainty, a tension in the relationship between Israel and the United States for a variety of reasons. In my view, from the Israeli perspective, justified. And I think we have a different day when the President of the United States, even if it was perhaps taken more strongly than some have than was intended, but to say we're going to have as a starting point in negotiations the 1967 boundaries just to start, you know, that's a rhetorical break, at least in terms of the public positioning from the United States. And then you have Benjamin Netanyahu clearly, both privately and publicly, expressing some apprehension. So Governor Romney has a different view of that. Governor Romney's view is both rhetorically, publicly, strategically, tactically, we should be shoulder to shoulder with Israel. There should be no daylight between us. And when it comes to issues of negotiating potential treaties going forward, you don't make pronouncements in advance of the negotiation about what Israel's starting position should be. And there's a number of other preconditions that Governor Romney would pursue in that regard. So, Bill, in the spirit of 2 or 3 minutes opening, I'll leave it at that, but I think the overarching point is you have a very different view of the degree of assertiveness that's required by the future leader of the indispensable nation as between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. I favor Mitt Romney's approach.
I mean, let me stay on the question of just Romney almost personally as a potential president and commander-in-chief, and Paul Ryan, who you also know well as a potential vice president, and then we can talk about Russia and Israel, Iran, and the obvious sort of parts of the world. I mean, I would say, talking to just citizens out there, neighbors and the like, there's a certain, in a funny way, the Republican Party, having nominated George H.W. Bush and then Bob Dole and John McCain, and even when it was George W. Bush, Dick Cheney was the number 2. I mean, that is a pretty startling list of nominees with extensive foreign policy, extensive military experience, and extensive foreign policy experience. Dole and McCain, real foreign policy leaders in the Senate, Cheney, former SecDef, and George H.W. Bush, ambassador to the UN and China, and then vice president. So, I do think it's a little bit of just a normal kind of Republican out there. It doesn't quite look like the previous Republican tickets, and it's not a crazy thing to say, well, how do we really know that Governor Romney is a governor and a businessman before that, Paul Ryan, a congressman from Wisconsin? I mean, you know them much better than almost everyone else in this room. I mean, what case would you make that these are people who it's not just they've read some good briefing papers on foreign policy, but have a kind of depth of knowledge, instinctive knowledge about foreign policy and national security that one didn't really have to bother. People could agree or disagree with a McCain or a Dole, but no one thought that they had to live with these issues for 10, 20, 30 years.
It's a great point, Bill, and I would just make a few responses. One, when you think about models for strong leaders and effective leaders in terms of foreign policy and national security, if you were looking at Ronald Reagan pre-presidency, you might suggest, well, he lacked certain quantitative credentials in terms of the spirit of your question. He turned out, of course, to be one of the most effective, most celebrated for good reasons, leaders on behalf of the United States in this area, in the modern history, maybe the entire history of the country, for one important reason. He was directionally and philosophically sound, and then of course he was able to fill in the blanks tactically and technically underneath that. But it starts with, are the people that you're going to entrust the safety and security of the United States of America, do they have a directionally and philosophical foundation that is in the right place, and is it sturdy? Knowing Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan quite well, I would suggest to you that foundationally and directionally they are sturdy and clear, Reagan-esque in that regard. Number two, the world is a rapidly moving place, and there's a lot of complexity and nuance, not just globally, but even within regions and even within individual countries. And so we want 360-degree thinkers. We want people who take the time and have taken the time to study history, who read, who not only have a directional and philosophical reaction to a situation, but an interest and an appetite to do the hard work and the homework to fully understand it 363 degrees, 60 degrees, and make a sound decision as a result of that. Clearly, anybody who knows and understands Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, you can check the box on that criteria as well. And then finally, of course, you need to trust who they have around them in terms of their directional and foundational soundness and their technical competence. And if you look at the particularly Mitt's executive record, Paul, of course, has not had as much track record in this regard, but if you look at the quality and nature of the people that they bring in, I think we can take confidence in what a future Romney-Ryan foreign policy and security team would look like. So for all those reasons, Bill, I'm confident and comfortable that it will not be an amateur hour. It will be a highly competent, highly successful, directionally and foundationally sound and informed and nuanced foreign policy.
I like that directionally and foundationally sound. I'm going to steal that formulation. No, I think it really, it sounds good and it sounds very sophisticated.
Sounds great.
Yeah, very good, yes. And, no, but I mean, and it is also an interesting point, because I mean, with Reagan, one forgets today, he's a revered figure, rightly, and successful foreign policy president, to say the least. But of course, at the time, when, compared to the minor alleged errors that Mitt Romney's made over, maybe they're not even real errors, I mean, Reagan had gaffes galore, was a candidate. He also focused on issues, frankly, that Hammock and Al, really, was that really the main issue of American foreign policy in 77, 78, and 79? Hard to believe in retrospect. And it turns out, I do think that being foundationally sound or directionally sound swamps the little things, and as you say, also swamps the, more detailed knowledge, I suppose, the incumbent president would always have over a governor who was challenging him. I mean, you mentioned Russia earlier on. It's really struck me just watching the coverage of this campaign. Because Romney said that Russia, what did he say, the greatest geopolitical threat, which maybe, he should have said a great geopolitical threat, because he maybe had an adjective that was slightly off. The media's just decided, well, that was a horrible gaffe, and he can't even mention Russia, and Russia, that's a terrible thing. Whereas if you step back and say, which big picture, or even medium-sized picture, which of them is basically right about Russia, and which wrong? It's one of the rare issues where there's, one of the issues where there's been a real difference between the two parties over 3-4 years, and there was a perfectly clear empirical test. I mean, Obama did the reset. No one stopped him from doing it. The Republican Congress didn't impede it. They went ahead and did it. They carried on with it, even when it looked like it might not work. They've kept on carrying on with it. And I really think, honestly, from my point of view, that in a way the Romney campaign got a little spooked perhaps by that one word, greatest, and backed off on the Russia debate, when in fact that's an issue maybe as much as any where you just had a clear test of the Obama-Biden foreign policy and a critique of it. And the criticism turned out to be pretty uniformly correct, of giving away Russia this Czech and Polish missile defenses, not speaking that much on human rights, didn't buy much cooperation on Iran, certainly hasn't bought cooperation on Syria. It's an interesting case study where the media obsesses about the gap, but the big directional picture, I think, would tell a very different story.
That's right. I agree with that. And one footnote to all of that, Mitt Romney's also a prolific reader, and he's a student of history. And so, obviously, history plays a role in these discussions, and understanding and remembering it and recalling and bringing forward those lessons is an important tool in the toolbox, and he's a serious student about history.
Good. Let's go through a bunch of issues now, whether I think there are pretty clear, you said, the media seems that some of them like the narrative that there are big differences, though of course, if you look around the world, there are quite a few differences. I think defense is maybe the most obvious, wouldn't you say, right now, where there's an actual pending legislative solution to the sequester, which the Republican House has passed, I believe, and Mitt Romney supports, and you've spoken a lot about this issue, and the Obama administration opposes. So.
I agree with all of that. I guess I'd step back even one step further and just remind everybody, you know this, but in the intermediate and long term, there is no security without prosperity. So we are only secure to the extent our ability to research, develop, manufacture, pay for, and deploy the tools of security requires us to be a prosperous nation. In the long run, there is no real security without prosperity. So I know this is a foreign policy discussion, but I think it's worth at least a momentary digression to say it is not ultimately unrelated to the economic growth and prosperity of this country going forward. And you know that debate in full glory. But as we sit here, we're debating whether for sure $500 billion, and maybe as much as $1 trillion, might actually be taken out of the defense budget over the next 10 years. Mitt Romney has been very forceful about saying that's not only unacceptable, and he wants to extinguish the sequester, but he's also said that if he's fortunate to become President of the United States, the defense budget overall will not be cut, and it in fact will be nominally increased, and he's had specific targets within that relative to the size of the Air Force, size of the Navy, and the like, that recommits America to a growing, but strategically growing, military. And it stands in stark contrast to President Obama's position and where he seems to be steering budgetary proposals for the military.
What about the soft power side of things? I mean, I haven't followed this as closely as you have, I think, in terms of what's going on at the State Department and some of the reform agenda there. It seems to me President Obama came to office very much touting how much smarter his use of power would be, smart power and soft power, whereas Bush was allegedly just this fanatic who unleashed the military and everything. And I would say, I mean, I don't even entirely disagree with the notion that we should be more intelligent in using soft power and smart power, and that the current U.S. government and the State Department are not well set up particularly for that. It's an organization that was set up many decades ago and hasn't been fundamentally reformed. It strikes me that one of the things that if I were a liberal supporter of President Obama, I'd be genuinely disappointed about, and Secretary Clinton, is why haven't they done that? They would have had a total easy playing field for it. There wouldn't have been any Republican opposition to reforming the Foreign Service and improving our public diplomacy and our international development assistance efforts. I don't think. They seem to me to have done very little in that, surprisingly, and maybe you could talk a little bit about what you think Governor Romney might do.
Thank you. All those are wonderful points. First of all, my party has a wing or a portion of it that is trending towards isolationism and trending towards being very hostile towards foreign aid and development monies. I think that's my personal view of that, is directionally not correct. For the modest amount of money that is on the table, doesn't mean it can't be reformed and we can't scrutinize it, but for the modest amount of money that we're talking about and the important role that it plays in terms of America's position, role in the world, I think it's important to preserve and maintain that commitment. However, how and when and the means through which the money gets distributed is in need of dramatic reform. As you know, the amount of entities just domestically that the agencies and entities that the money flows through is mind-numbing just as a org chart. And then of course that replicates itself and sometimes exponentially multiplies itself on the receiving entity or branch entities in the country that we're trying to help. And then of course you have the layers of bureaucracy or worse, like corruption before the money actually reaches its intended destination. What I'm about to describe to you isn't an answer for all of the programs and all of the instances, but I think it gives you a glimpse into what a potential future of reform might look like. A friend of mine is heavily involved in development work in Africa. He serves in a variety of ways in that regard, but one is to provide assistance, both governmental and nonprofit NGO assistance to refugee camps. He's working on a pilot program that would take the equivalent amount of money that we currently send, and rather than sending it through the normal funnel of bureaucracies, corruption, inefficiencies, he's observed that an amazing number of people have or could, for a very small amount of money, get cell phones with at least modest capabilities. And you would vendor download the money onto the cell phones of the individuals in these refugee camps, and you would pre-authorize the expenditure of the money for certain pre-designated services that they know to be available, such as preventative health care, such as immunization, such as food, all within the perimeter of the refugee camp or nearby. And if you were able to accomplish a vision like that, what it would do is give the individual, first of all, incredible dignity. He or she would have accountability around the account, at least in a basic level, but guardrails would be up to protect them because you could only use it for limited purposes which were known to be available. And you'd have the ability in one almost magical technological moment to leapfrog all of the, BS of the current bureaucracy and development structure and get the aid directly to the individual for intended purposes. Now that's, at this stage, a vision and a pilot project. And there's a lot between where we are now and that, but as a glimpse of what the future might hold. And I don't think it's necessarily that far off. It's an exciting and promising glimpse into the future. And then more broadly, we need to streamline these agencies and we need to get the goals up on the dashboard and we need to make sure that our aid and development money is conditions-based to the fullest extent possible. And again, a great discussion about what the conditions are, what circumstances and the like, but the idea that we're shoveling money out without regard to particular conditions or performance expectations or certain behavioral improvements that we'd like to see is a relic of a bygone era. And I think we got to be much sharper and much tougher on that front.
Just curious, I'm thinking more about your interesting comments about the cell phone bill. But you've been traveling a lot internationally in the last, fair amount as governor, but really a lot in the last 2 years. I've been at conferences and many world leaders in Europe and Asia, Middle East. What did you learn that you might not have known 2 years ago? This is an honest question, not a political question. I'm just curious, and I'm sure you in a way had much more time to reflect on this than when you had to hurry back from leading, Minnesota troops in Iraq or going to a conference representing, the state and not a commercial enterprise. And that's a sort of business, and you go and you do your job and probably hurry back to Minneapolis, St. Paul, whereas you had more time to, in a way, have, I suppose, somewhat more reflective discussions with foreign leaders and both government and business over the last couple of years. Did it strike you about?
Yeah, well, a number of things strike me in no particular order, but just some reflections from the road, if you will. I remember being in Iraq and we were doing a reverse trip in the boots or the shoes of a wounded warrior from battlefield all the way back to Washington, D.C. And I remember getting a demonstration on the Israeli-invented single knob tourniquets. And so the point was, if you were in a position where you didn't have both hands, you could still self-tourniquet by being able to spin the knob on one. And the briefing related to these incredible individuals who pre-tourniqueted themselves before going into special ops missions. They would put these on their upper extremities, on their legs and upper arms before they would go into these situations under theory and presumption that on any given night they or their colleagues right next to them are going to have an event that might cost them a limb or worse. And so you think about the psychological burden of what that would entail for you or I every day to have to get up in the morning and pre-tourniquet yourself before you went to work, thinking that today may be the day that you lose a limb or lose your life. So anytime we have a discussion about these brave men and women, and I know we owe them more than our words, it was such a profound moment for me. And then so when you think about issues like PTSD, when you think about issues of reintegration with the family back home and the burdens that these men and women have bared as they've served us, we can't do enough, we can't say enough to encourage them and support them. I would also say, with respect to the State Department and the NGO world and all the folks who work hard, I know people like me and others are reformists and we want to be critical and have them be accountable, but there are really brave, hard-working, sincere people who are in really difficult spots all over the world who knock themselves out for our country, and who are diplomats and NGO workers, and we owe them our best efforts and thanks and appreciation. And then finally, Bill, and I think maybe to the heart of your question, there is a sense that in my limited travels, an anecdote and narrative can get you in trouble, so I hate to overgeneralize, because you talk to one person and they give you their worldview and you can't just come home and make a sweeping conclusion about it. But there's clearly a sense that there's great hope and need while people may bicker a little bit with us, they want the United States to lead. And in many quarters, in many circumstances, they're disappointed in what they see a lack of American leadership or involvement in many, not all, but many situations around the world. And they're openly wondering.
Tomorrow night, what won't he say, but he, because of constraints of time, but that he believes? I mean, honestly, what's, 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes, what's the sort of core message that you think the Romney Ryan ticket needs to tell the American citizens, the American public about national security?
Well, I'll answer that directly, but let me add my voice of thanks for you being here. The logistics of getting here are not easy, given the security perimeters and procedures, and so we appreciate you making the effort to be here and be part of this discussion. I also want to thank FPI for the important and needed work that they do and the voice that they are with respect to national security and foreign policy issues. This is a terrific organization. Some of you, maybe all of you, enjoyed their overnight brief. It is a terrific read every morning. It gives you, of course, a very quick spin through the preceding events in national security and world affairs in the preceding 24 hours. And I really applaud and am grateful for FPI's work and voice in this discussion. And it's personified by people like Bill Kristol. Bill, of course, is a leader in FBI and a lot of other things, but his thoughtfulness and seriousness and the understanding that he brings to it in terms of complexity and strength is really wonderful. And I want to thank you, Bill, for your voice as well. With respect to Governor Romney and the campaign that is in front of us between now and November, there's been some voices in the media. It's kind of interesting, I would say, on the center-left end of the continuum, who've kind of said, with respect to foreign policy, there's essentially no difference between President Obama and Governor Romney. And I think that's a strategic or tactical effort on their part to say, let's not highlight some of the differences because, in my view, they're not favorable to the president. And I won't go through the full list, Bill, but I think as an overarching statement, you have a president who, in more than one instance, has taken a step or two or three back from the role of global leader, as inspired by the future leader of the indispensable nation, as between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. I favor Mitt Romney's approach.
I mean, let me stay on the question of just Romney almost personally as a potential president and commander-in-chief, and Paul Ryan, who you also know well as a potential vice president, and then we can talk about Russia and Israel, Iran, and the obvious sort of parts of the world. I mean, I would say, talking to just citizens out there, neighbors and the like, there's a certain, in a funny way, the Republican Party, having nominated George H.W. Bush and then Bob Dole and John McCain, and even when it was George W. Bush, Dick Cheney was the number 2. I mean, that is a pretty startling list of nominees with extensive foreign policy, extensive military experience, and extensive foreign policy experience. Dole and McCain, real foreign policy leaders in the Senate, Cheney, former SecDef, and George H.W. Bush, ambassador to the UN and China, and then vice president. So, I do think it's a little bit of just a normal kind of Republican out there. It doesn't quite look like the previous Republican tickets, and it's not a crazy thing to say, well, how do we really know that Governor Romney is a governor, a businessman before that, Paul Ryan, a congressman from Wisconsin? I mean, you know them much better than almost everyone else in this room. I mean, what case would you make that these are people who it's not just they've read some good briefing papers on foreign policy, but have a kind of depth of knowledge, instinctive knowledge about foreign policy and national security that one didn't really have to bother. People could agree or disagree with a McCain or a Dole, but no one thought that they had to live with these issues for 10, 20, 30 years.
It's a great point, Bill, and I would just make a few responses. One, when you think about models for strong leaders and effective leaders in terms of foreign policy and national security, if you were looking at Ronald Reagan pre-presidency, you might suggest, well, he lacked certain quantitative credentials in terms of the spirit of your question. He turned out, of course, to be one of the most effective, arguably lost his job over this decision to help the United States. And you have Lech Walesa, after the fact, quoted, I believe, in the New York Times, saying, in the wake of the decision to pull the rug out from the Czech Republic and Poland, you had Lech Walesa say, you can, quote, no longer trust the United States of America, close quote. These are sights and sounds, not of a world leader of the indispensable nation leading from the front, but these are sights and sounds of a leader who has a different approach and tempo. So, and I can go on. Look, for example, with respect to the relationship with Israel. Clearly within Israel, both in terms of the populace as well as the leadership, there is an apprehension, an uncertainty, a tension in the relationship between Israel and the United States for a variety of reasons. In my view, from the Israeli perspective, justified. And I think we have a different day when the President of the United States, even if it was perhaps taken more strongly than than was intended, but to say we're going to have as a starting point in negotiations the 1967 boundaries just to start, that's a rhetorical break, at least in terms of the public positioning from the United States. And then you have Benjamin Netanyahu clearly, both privately and publicly, expressing some apprehension. So Governor Romney has a different view of that. Governor Romney's view is both rhetorically, publicly, strategically, tactically, we should be shoulder to shoulder with Israel. There should be no daylight between us. And when it comes to issues of negotiating potential treaties going forward, you don't make pronouncements in advance of the negotiation about what Israel's starting position should be. And there's a number of other preconditions that Governor Romney would pursue in that regard. So, Bill, in the spirit of 2 or 3 minutes opening, I'll leave it at that, but I think the overarching point is you have a very different view of the degree of assertiveness that's required. Indispensable nation, leader of the indispensable nation. And I think you see in Governor Romney a willingness to be more assertive and leading not from behind but in front. Let me give you a few examples of that. President Obama, of course, has, with great fanfare, entered into a reset with Russia, restarting the relationships with Russia. That has had a lot of complexity around it for understandable reason, but it started out with a thirst by the president to negotiate an arms reduction treaty that Governor Romney has significant concerns with, particularly as it relates to the Russians' interpretation and impression that it may limit the United States' ability going forward for the most robust missile defense systems or additional missile defense systems. The president not only has embraced that treaty and cites it as one of his landmark accomplishments, but he's now signaled, both on mic and off mic, that he intends to take that even further, the parameters of which and contours of which remain to be seen. Governor Romney has said he would review that treaty, and in particular as it relates to missile defense systems, he would have done it and would do it differently going forward. As you know, one of the decisions in this regard after President Bush asked 2 of our best friends in the world, namely the Czech Republic and Poland, to stick their necks out, both militarily and politically, to host missile defense and radar installations in the Czech Republic and Poland. President Obama came into office and withdrew that decision. Now, there's great merit, I think, to President Bush's initiative in that regard and to have gone forward with that, but even setting aside the technical aspects of that decision, once you have 2 of your great allies and friends extend their neck that far out because the United States asked them to, and in the case of the former Prime Minister of the Czech Republic,
I think we're ready to get started. Thanks for your patience. My name is Jamie Fly. I'm the Executive Director of the Foreign Policy Initiative. So today we're very honored to have Governor Pawlenty with us. I'm going to turn it over to Bill Kristol, one of FBI's founding board members, to introduce the governor and then moderate a conversation with him. Bill?
Thanks, Jamie, and thank you all for coming and making your way through the rain and the security nightmare and other things. Knowing trouble goes out. It's good to have you here. It's great to have, I want to thank Tim Pawlenty for taking the time to do this. It's awfully busy, obviously, as a top, maybe the top Romney surrogate and spokesman. He needs no introduction, 2-term governor of Minnesota, very fine record there. We first believed that when he was governor and talked about domestic policy, but I think Tim and I went on a trip to a security conference in Munich together while you were still governor, 08, 09, with Senator McCain, Senator Lieberman. And I remember at the time going back and telling people in the office that you maybe governors are awfully busy, and especially in a state like Minnesota, where it's not a piece of cake to get your legislative agenda through and deal with the legislature and all that. And here was someone who really was interested in and knowledgeable about foreign policy. Maybe I was late in realizing this, but it's certainly become very, very evident over the last 4 years, too, especially the last couple of years when you were out of office and you spent so much time focusing on national security at a time when, honestly, the immediate political payoff perhaps would have been not quite spent so much time traveling abroad and meeting world leaders, and you really, I think, it's a model of public spiritedness that you spend so much time doing this, and now you're spending an hour with us here is just a further moment in public spiritedness, and so thank you for doing that, and I just thought we'd have a conversation and spend some time on with questions. What do you expect Governor Romney to say about that?